Hi, this is Ben and Tony from Tyner Commercial Real Estate, and today we're going to be talking about the 8 steps to leasing a property. It's kind of a long topic, so we will break this into 2 videos. The first part will be locating space, the second part will be securing that space. So basically there are 8 steps to securing and finding a new space for lease. Step 1 is to really define your requirements. There's quite a few things to consider in this step. We'll go into this in more detail in a second. Number 2 is to actually get a good sense of what properties are out there and what might work for your space. Step 3 is touring the best spaces. And then step number 4 would be sending in a proposal to lease. Step number 5, 4 and 5 can be interchangeable depending on your need, but step number 5 would be space planning and or architectural considerations. Number 6 is actually looking at the offers that come back to you and comparing them. Number 7 would be negotiating your lease, and number 8 is closing the deal.
Starting with defining your requirements, we've been discussing how much we can really get into this and how deep we could go with this. Defining your requirements has a multiplicity of levels to it, including geographic locations, how many private offices, open area, reception, break room, kitchen, if you're in a different type of a retail space or industrial space, anything from power to location, it all can play a role. So defining your requirements is really an exercise you want to go through step by step to determine not only what you need now, but what you may need during the duration of that particular lease term.
That's a great point. And your needs will definitely vary depending on your specific use. We have checklists and pages of questions to help you define this, depending on if you're industrial, everything from what type of clear height do you need, how many cubic square feet do you need, and if you need roll-up doors, what size docks. If you're in retail, you're going to want the demographics, and you're going to want to know traffic count and your visibility, exactly.
Signage.
So, and if you're in office, then you're looking at image, you're looking at glass lines, what sizes you need offices. The distance between the mullions will make a difference on what type of offices you can build in the space. So obviously there's going to be a longer list, and this is something we can help auger down into and really help create an ounce of prevention, pound of cure.
Yeah, the homework that you do in defining your requirement up front will really help your time locating that next space be more efficient and effective. Which really brings us to the second step, which is locating suitable properties. So once you've gone through that exercise of defining your requirements to the best of your ability and with the assistance of your broker, locating the suitable properties to actually look at is an entirely different process. And we speak to a lot of people who've been spending time driving around, calling on signs, and certainly driving through areas you think you want to be located in is understandable. However, just calling on signs or off Craigslist ads or however you might do it is not the most efficient way to find out what the best deal out there possible is. Because typically you're speaking to the landlord's broker. When you're speaking to the landlord's broker, they are really being paid to take the landlord's position and therefore give you the straightforward, this is the number, whether or not it really is the best deal you can possibly find. So it's really helpful to have someone who does tenant representation, represent you in this process, assist you from the very beginning in terms of locating those properties and suitable to the requirements that you've specified, and doing their research for you from a broker standpoint, broker to broker, to find the best deals in the marketplace for you, which ones have tenant improvements available, tenant incentives such as free rent, etc. available. These are things that are going to be much easier found if you've got tenant representation in your favor.
Good point, Tony. I'm actually want to give some of the tools that people use to help find space besides just driving around. There are a few commercial real estate pages. CoStar is a really good resource to use. LoopNet is another good resource. And believe it or not, Craigslist has really been coming on the scene strong in the last 5 years. So you want to look on Craigslist as well. Driving the space is good, and if you're going to drive a corridor, I really would recommend that you drive this corridor on the weekend and take with you your smartphone or some type of a microphone that you can take pictures with, and also record some of your thoughts and your questions. That way, when you go to make your calls to either your broker or to the number on the sign, you can remember all the points that you thought of when you were there. Also, if you are on the weekends, the parking lots are much more open, and you'll have a better sense of what's there.
On the other hand, something to think about is if parking, for example, would be an issue, then you definitely want to be there during the week and see how the parking activity is to make sure that in the building you might be looking at going into, you're not going to have a problem fighting for parking space, or your clients aren't.
That's especially important if you're looking at medical space or in an office park. Or retail, but where the parking may be limited. Often you'll also notice in the advertising how many spaces are per 1,000. And sometimes downtown, for example, you'll get as low as 2 spaces per 1,000, whereas in the suburbs, your office spaces may have 4 or up to 6 spaces per 1,000.
Per 1,000 per square feet.
Yes.
In case you don't know. So that's just really the beginning of locating suitable properties. We provide a multiplicity of detailed reports with information on any market area that our clients are interested in, with details of addresses, space variances, rates, etc. And then you can do your tour, your initial tour of driving in the different areas. After you've done a general search and you've cut down the list to the whatever number of properties you'd actually like to go in on a tour, that's your next step. Now you've got this honed list of properties that you feel meet your criteria, are in the location, and have the space requirements that you need. Now you go out and actually look at some spaces. And that's what we call touring properties. That's something that you want to set up for 1-2 hour window of time where you're literally going space to space, looking at the spaces, making a determination if the interiors do fit or will fit with some work, the requirements you find necessary to make your business work.
One recommendation that I would make is don't schedule more than 5 to 6 properties in one shot. What happens if you get too long of a list, they all start blurring, and it's really hard to make that comparison at the end of the day or the next day when you're going back through everything you looked at and you think, was that the property without the elevators, or was that the property that I really liked the lobby on? Because eventually your mind has a hard time separating all of the spaces if you have too many in one day.
One of the things we understand in this is that each individual tenant has specific requirements that need to be met. So while we're making some generalized statements today, we understand that, for example, sometimes pricing is key for certain businesses. The price point and the budget for rent is a key factor in the decision making. However, some retailers, for example, location is the key criteria, or the style or location within the park or within a particular market is really the key criteria, and they'll pay extra to get that. So depending on what that is, and then there's always the choice of who is your landlord. That really should be an important component to take a look at as you go through this process. Some landlords are more motivated than others, some landlords are better property managers than others. So you really want to consider all these factors as you go forward and discuss them with your broker so they can help and coach you along the way.
Excellent point, and often something you can key into on your tour, especially in all the common corridors. How well is it maintained? What does it look like? what is the image and what will my client see? These are great questions to ask yourself as you're touring. So hopefully by this point you have actually come down to your favorite 3 to 5 properties, and you are now getting ready to make the step of actually writing a proposal to lease.
Sometimes you might make several proposals at one time. If you've got 2 or 3 properties, they all could work, and you really want to see where the best deal is, or where the most incentives are being offered by the landlord. The way to test that is to make the offer. Now, the offers are typically made in the form of a letter of intent. They're not binding on either party, but it helps the parties suggest proposed terms, allows the landlord to respond to those proposed terms, and see if there's an agreement in general concept. If there is, then you go to lease, you negotiate the lease agreement, and somewhere along the line, we've got step 4 is making a proposal. You may find that space planning and architectural evaluation would come in before that. It really depends on the particular tenant and how important space planning and architectural evaluation is to that particular use.
That's a good point. And another piece to consider when you are presenting your letter of intent is to keep it simple. The main reason here is just to make sure you and the landlord can get on the same page on the main important points. It's not time to hammer out the small little details, those can come later. It's is it worth spending your time to look more closely at your space planning, at the cost of moving, and if it's even worth pursuing further negotiations. This is a good point to see if you and the landlord can get on the same page.
That concludes part 1 of the 8 steps of leasing. We've covered define your requirements, locate suitable properties, touring the properties, and making a proposal. In the next steps, we'll cover space planning and architectural evaluation, analyzing the responses to your offers, the negotiation process of a lease contract itself, and of course closing the transaction and you're moving into your new space. Please be sure to tune in for part 2. Thanks.